A wealthy businessman named Gregory Langston, known for his arrogance, arrived at the Grand Pearl, his favorite high-end restaurant. The cool evening air carried the scent of gourmet cuisine as Gregory stepped out of his polished black luxury car, tossing the keys to a waiting valet without a glance. His tailored suit gleamed under the dim lights of the entrance, exuding an aura of wealth and entitlement. "Good evening, Mr. Langston," the doorman greeted with a respectful nod, rushing to open the glass door. Gregory barely acknowledged him, striding confidently into the elegant interior. Soft classical music played in the background, mingling with the faint clinking of silverware on fine china. Gregory inhaled deeply, reveling in the exclusivity that surrounded him. Moments later, the maître, an older gentleman with a distinguished air, approached quickly. "Mr. Langston, a pleasure to see you this evening. Your usual table is ready." "Excellent," Gregory replied, his tone dismissive as he followed the maître d' to his preferred corner table. His sharp eyes scanned the room, noting the polished and affluent patrons. This was Gregory's world, a realm where wealth dictated status and power reigned supreme. Settling into the plush leather chair, Gregory took the menu handed to him and gave it a curt glance before addressing the hovering waiter. "The usual champagne, Charles," he instructed. "Right away, Mr. Langston." Charles replied, hurrying off to fulfill the order. Gregory leaned back, a smug grin curling at his lips. Here he was treated like royalty. The staff knew his preferences by heart and ensured his every need was anticipated. It was a world far removed from the one outside, where to Gregory's frustration, his importance often went unnoticed. As Gregory browsed the menu, snippets of conversations from nearby tables reached his ears. Business deals, opulent vacations, and the latest luxury purchases filled the air. Gregory felt a deep sense of belonging among people who understood his values: power, money, and prestige. When Charles returned with the champagne, Gregory watched as the delicate bubbles caught the light of the chandelier. He raised his glass, savoring the first sip, while the waiter asked for his dinner order. "The filet mignon, medium rare." "The usual," Gregory said without glancing up. "An excellent choice, sir," Charles said, noting it down before stepping away. Just as Gregory settled back into his chair, his gaze shifted to the restaurant entrance. His smile faded into a frown. A black family had entered. A tall, confident man held the door for his elegantly dressed wife and their young son, whose wide eyes sparkled with wonder. Gregory's brows knitted together, his lips thinning into a hard line. "Why are they here?" Gregory muttered under his breath, his fingers drumming on the table. His sharp eyes followed them as the maître greeted the family warmly and led them to a table nearby. The little boy giggled as his mother whispered something in his ear, and Gregory's annoyance deepened. He noticed how the father, Nathan Carter, ordered their meal with ease and confidence, as if they belonged there. The staff's respectful treatment of the Carters only irritated Gregory further. He tapped his fingers more forcefully against the table, his thoughts racing. "They can't possibly afford this place," Gregory thought, scrutinizing their every move. To him, their presence disrupted the exclusivity of the Grand Pearl, a place he believed should be reserved only for people like himself. Gregory Langston couldn't shake the nagging sense that the Carter family was out of place. As his meal arrived, the perfectly plated filet mignon, Gregory found his attention continuously drawn to the table across the room. The sound of their soft laughter grated on his nerves, disrupting his usual enjoyment of the luxurious atmosphere. He clenched his knife and fork tightly, cutting into his steak with more force than necessary. Each bite, though expertly cooked, was tainted by his growing irritation. Gregory's eyes darted back to the Carters, Nathan, his wife Monica, and their son Caleb. He scrutinized every detail: their clothes, their manners, their interactions. Surely, he thought, there had to be something to confirm his assumption that they didn't belong. Yet, to his frustration, he found nothing. They carried themselves with elegance and ease, as if they were accustomed to such an environment. Gregory's annoyance grew, the storm within him intensifying. His scowl deepened, and he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for nearby diners to catch. "Look at them, acting like they belong here." A couple seated at the next table shifted uncomfortably, exchanging concerned glances. Gregory, however, remained oblivious to their reaction, too absorbed in his perceived slight to the restaurant's exclusivity. "I bet they're putting this on a credit card they can't afford to pay off," he sneered, his voice rising slightly. He stabbed at his steak with such force that his knife scraped loudly against the porcelain plate, the unpleasant screech cutting through the soft ambiance of the dining room. Meanwhile, the Carters were settling in, completely unaware of Gregory's disdainful gaze. Nathan, calm and confident, ordered a bottle of the house red. "We'll have the house red, please," Nathan said, his voice warm and assured. From his table, Gregory scoffed loudly, his tone dripping with condescension. "House red," he muttered. "Figures they'd go for the cheapest option." The tension in the room began to build as Gregory's muttered insults drew the attention of other diners. Patrons shot disapproving glances in his direction, their faces a mix of shock and disgust. A woman leaned toward her husband, whispering, "Someone should say something. This is awful." The Carters, however, were blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around them. Monica gently adjusted Caleb's napkin, tucking it neatly into his collar. The boy's eyes sparkled as he pointed discreetly at the shimmering chandelier overhead. "Look, Mommy," Caleb whispered with awe. "It's so shiny." Monica smiled, smoothing a hand over her son's hair. "It is, sweetheart. Isn't this place magical?" Their joy stood in stark contrast to the dark cloud of Gregory's disdain. As the waiter returned to the Carters' table with their wine, Gregory's simmering condescension boiled over. "I can't believe they're letting just anyone in here now," he muttered loudly, ensuring half the room could hear. This used to be an exclusive establishment. The discomfort among the other patrons was palpable. Some cast sympathetic glances toward the Carters, while others glared at Gregory, silently urging him to stop. But Gregory was undeterred, his focus entirely on the perceived affront to his world of wealth and privilege. Ryan, Gregory's waiter, approached his table, balancing a silver tray with practiced ease. "Your appetizer, Mr. Langston," Ryan said, placing the plate before him. The dish was a delicate foie gras, artfully arranged. Gregory barely acknowledged it, his attention still fixed on the Carters. "Tell me, Ryan," he began, his tone oozing disdain. "How often do we get guests like that in here?" He gestured toward the Carters with a slight jerk of his head. Ryan's polite smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir," he replied cautiously. "We welcome all guests here at the Grand Pearl." Gregory snorted, leaning back in his chair with an air of superiority. "Come on, you know what I'm talking about. People who clearly don't fit in with our usual clientele." Ryan shifted uncomfortably, the professionalism he wore like armor beginning to crack. "Sir, I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment on other guests." With a dismissive wave, Gregory retorted, "I suppose you're right. It's just surprising to see them here." Ryan nodded stiffly, retreating to the kitchen as quickly as decorum allowed. He exchanged a glance with another server, his discomfort evident. Across the room, the Carters continued to enjoy their evening, their quiet happiness unfazed by the storm of judgment brewing just a few tables away. Gregory Langston leaned closer to Ryan, his tone dripping with smugness. "I hope they can afford this without skipping their rent," he muttered with a conspiratorial smirk. Ryan's polite demeanor faltered, his face tightening with discomfort. Attempting to steer the conversation elsewhere, he gestured to the plate. "How is your appetizer, Mr. Langston? Is everything to your liking?" Gregory ignored the question entirely, leaning forward again. Lowering his voice but loud enough for his disdain to be clear, he said, "I bet they're here on some charity voucher. That's the only way people like that could afford a place like this, right?" Ryan's unease was palpable. He glanced around nervously, hoping the other diners hadn't overheard Gregory's cruel remarks. Keeping his voice measured, he replied, "Perhaps we could discuss the wine selection for your entree, sir?" Gregory waved him off dismissively. "Oh, never mind that. I'm far more curious about how this restaurant is maintaining its standards these days." The waiter stood rigid, visibly torn between his duty and his growing dismay at Gregory's behavior. Before Ryan could muster a response, Gregory cut him off, pointing his fork toward the Carter family. "Just look at them," Gregory continued, his voice thick with contempt. "They probably think they're so refined. Being here, I wonder if they even know which fork to use." Across the room, Nathan, Monica, and Caleb Carter were beginning to enjoy their meal. Gregory's frustration boiled over. He could no longer keep his disdain contained. He let out a loud, mocking laugh that echoed through the elegant dining room, startling several patrons. All eyes turned to Gregory as he gestured toward the Carter family. "Look at them," he exclaimed, his voice loud enough to carry across the room. "How on earth did they manage to afford a place like this?" Gasps rippled through the room. Forks clattered against plates as diners froze, staring at Gregory in shock. His flushed face was a mix of anger and derision, his words cutting through the air like knives. "I bet they sold their car just to eat here tonight," Gregory said, his voice growing louder and more offensive with every word. "Or maybe they're lost? Took a wrong turn at the drive-thru, perhaps?" At their table, Nathan placed a protective hand on Caleb's small shoulder. Monica's expression remained calm, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of hurt. The family exchanged uneasy glances, their faces a mixture of confusion and restraint. Refusing to dignify Gregory's taunts with a response, they focused on their meal and each other, their dignity unshaken. Encouraged by the attention he was receiving, Gregory stood from his chair, swaying slightly under the influence of his earlier drinks. "Come on, tell us," he called out, pointing at Nathan. "What's your secret? Did you win the lottery? Or are you some charity case here for a pity meal?" The restaurant fell into an oppressive silence, save for Gregory's jeering voice. Waiters stood frozen, unsure how to intervene without causing further disruption. Other patrons sat stiffly in their seats, their faces a mix of horror and disgust. Some averted their eyes in embarrassment, while others glared openly at Gregory, their disapproval written clearly across their faces. The Carter family, however, remained composed. Nathan squeezed Monica's hand under the table, offering her silent reassurance. Monica leaned into Caleb, brushing his hair gently as she whispered comforting words to their son. Caleb, sensing the tension but not fully understanding the situation, looked up at his parents with trusting eyes. As Gregory's taunts continued, the contrast between his arrogance and the Carters' quiet grace became stark. The family spoke softly among themselves, sharing a small laugh as Caleb recounted a joke. Their warmth and resilience shone, creating a bubble of calm in the midst of the hostile atmosphere Gregory had created. Other diners couldn't help but overhear Gregory's increasingly loud and offensive remarks. His words hung in the air like a dark cloud, casting an uncomfortable pall over the once refined ambiance of the room. Conversations faltered, and eyes darted nervously between Gregory and the Carters. "How is this even happening?" whispered a woman to her companion, her face etched with disbelief. As the tension in the room reached its peak, the Carters maintained their quiet strength, refusing to give Gregory the satisfaction of a reaction. Their grace under pressure stood in stark contrast to his crude behavior, leaving many in the restaurant feeling both admiration for the Carters and shame for their own silence. Meanwhile, Gregory, emboldened by his perceived dominance, continued his tirade, oblivious to the growing disgust around him. His mocking laughter reverberated through the room, but the Carters remained focused on each other, their unity unbroken. At first, the diners were frozen in shock, their meals abandoned. But as the minutes ticked by, something began to change. The initial disbelief at Gregory's outburst gave way to a quiet wave of sympathy for the Carters. Their calm, dignified demeanor in the face of such open hostility moved many. Whispers of support began to ripple through the room. At a nearby table, an elderly couple exchanged disapproving glances before shaking their heads in silent condemnation of Gregory's behavior. A young woman dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, moved to tears by the family's grace under fire. Even the waitstaff, despite their efforts to remain professional, couldn't fully mask their discomfort. The contrast between Gregory's loud, growing rage and the Carters' serene composure was striking. While he became increasingly agitated, the Carters sat tall, their expressions calm and unflinching. It was as though they were insulated by an invisible shield of peace. Untouched by the storm Gregory was stirring. Ryan, Gregory's waiter, approached his table, carrying a tray with the main course. His hands trembled slightly as he set the dish down, acutely aware of the tension suffocating the once refined atmosphere. Gregory, however, remained oblivious. He jabbed his fork in the direction of the Carters, his voice dripping with disdain. "Can you believe they're still here?" he sneered. People like that shouldn't be allowed in a place like this. Ryan flushed, his face a mix of embarrassment and anger. He struggled to keep his tone even as he asked, "Is everything to your satisfaction, Mr. Langston?" Gregory barely acknowledged the question. His focus remained fixed on the Carters. "I bet they can't even read the menu," he scoffed, his laughter cruel and hollow. "They're probably just pointing at the pictures." Ryan shifted uncomfortably, glancing around the room. Every eye in the restaurant was now on their table. Diners watched with a blend of horror and morbid fascination as Gregory's behavior escalated, his words growing sharper and more offensive. Unable to endure the scene any longer, Ryan excused himself and made his way to the Carter family's table. As he approached, he noticed the subtle strain behind their composed expressions. Despite their calm demeanor, the weight of Gregory's hostility was evident in their tired eyes. Ryan leaned in as he refilled their water glasses, lowering his voice to a whisper. "I'm so sorry about this," he said, his tone filled with genuine remorse. "Please know we don't condone behavior like that." Nathan gave him a small nod, his eyes conveying a mix of gratitude and exhaustion. Monica briefly touched Ryan's arm in silent thanks for his kindness. As Ryan moved between tables, he felt the oppressive weight of the situation bearing down on him. Though ashamed of Gregory's conduct, he was powerless to intervene directly. The restaurant's policy of catering to its wealthy regulars like Gregory left him bound by professional constraints. Meanwhile, Gregory's loud, mocking laughter echoed across the dining room, shattering the air of sophistication. His sneering voice was impossible to ignore. "Look at them," Gregory said, holding up his wine glass with a derisive grin. "Trying to figure out the fancy silverware. It's like watching monkeys at a tea party." His cruel comments hung in the air, creating a toxic atmosphere. The once harmonious clinking of cutlery and fine china had been overshadowed by Gregory's relentless tirade. Diners shifted uncomfortably in their seats, exchanging worried glances. Some looked toward the Carters with silent support, while others stared at Gregory with open disdain. And yet, despite the growing tension, the Carters remained steadfast. They ignored Gregory's provocations, refusing to be drawn into his cruelty. Nathan quietly leaned toward Monica, whispering a reassuring word. Monica, in turn, focused on Caleb, gently brushing a strand of hair from his face and encouraging him to finish his meal. Their strength in the face of such blatant disrespect spoke volumes. While Gregory's words filled the room with negativity, the Carters radiated calmness, their unity and resilience a stark contrast to his hostility. Though Gregory's voice rose louder, his taunts cutting deeper, the Carters' composed response served as a quiet defiance, silently demonstrating that dignity and grace would prevail over hate. At a nearby table, an elderly couple exchanged whispers, their faces marked with concern. A young woman dining alone nervously glanced between Gregory and the Carters, her meal untouched. Even a group of businessmen who had been deep in a lively discussion earlier now sat in uneasy silence, their eyes darting toward Gregory's table. The atmosphere of the restaurant had shifted dramatically. What was once an evening of refined dining had transformed into a scene fraught with tension. The soft strains of classical music seemed to fade under the weight of Gregory's relentless mockery. As the Carters finished their meal, Nathan dabbed his mouth with a napkin and met the gaze of Ryan, the waiter. With a subtle nod, he signaled for the check. The restaurant had fallen eerily quiet, the usual hum of conversation replaced by an anxious stillness. Patrons held their breath, waiting to see how the uncomfortable evening would end. Gregory, oblivious to the unease he had caused, continued to mutter under his breath, his gaze fixed on the Carters. Across the room, diners exchanged nervous glances, their meals long forgotten as they watched the drama unfold. Ryan approached the Carters' table with careful, measured steps. As he reached them, his eyes met Nathan's, silently conveying his apology for the events of the evening. "Thank you," Nathan said softly, his voice steady despite the strain of the night. The meal was excellent. Monica offered Ryan a warm smile, her poise undiminished by Gregory's offensive behavior. "Everything was wonderful," she added graciously. Little Caleb, sensing the tension but not fully understanding its cause, looked up at Ryan with innocent curiosity. Ryan's heart ached at the sight, but he simply nodded in acknowledgement and moved on, his professionalism masking his discomfort. The Carters remained composed throughout the evening, their voices low and their heads held high. They refused to let Gregory's behavior tarnish their night completely. Their quiet grace stood in stark contrast to Gregory's scowling and muttering. The other diners watched with a mix of admiration and guilt. Many felt ashamed of their silence in the face of Gregory's bigotry, their eyes downcast as the Carters prepared to leave. Meanwhile, Gregory savored the final bites of his gourmet meal, a smug smile curling his lips. He felt satisfied, not just with the exquisite food, but with his own perceived superiority. The restaurant remained quiet, the earlier tension lingering like an oppressive fog. Ryan approached Gregory's table, his professional demeanor firmly in place, despite the discomfort he felt. "I hope you enjoyed your meal, sir," Ryan said politely, his tone betraying no hint of the evening's earlier events as he cleared away the empty plates. Ryan discreetly placed a folded piece of paper on the crisp white tablecloth. Gregory barely glanced at it, assuming it was nothing more than his bill. "Just leave it there," Gregory said dismissively, waving his hand. "I'll take care of it shortly." Ryan nodded and retreated, leaving Gregory alone with the note. As Gregory sipped his after-dinner cognac, his eyes kept drifting toward the folded paper. Curiosity began to creep in. What if it wasn't just the bill? What if Ryan had left him a message? Unable to resist, Gregory reached for the note with his manicured fingers, unfolding it carefully. His confident expression wavered as he began to read. The words on the paper hit him like a thunderclap. The color drained from his face, his smugness replaced by a look of utter shock. The note in Gregory Langston's hands revealed a truth so staggering, it left him breathless. The Carter family, the very people he had mocked and belittled all evening, were not merely wealthy, they were the owners of the Grand Pearl. Beyond that, they were prominent business leaders, running several successful enterprises across the city. They were also widely respected philanthropists who had recently returned from a charitable mission overseas. Gregory's hands trembled as he reread the note, his mind struggling to absorb the weight of its implications. The smug superiority he had carried throughout the evening evaporated, replaced by a sinking feeling in his stomach. He had spent hours ridiculing the very people who not only matched his status, but far surpassed him in reputation and community standing. He glanced around the restaurant, suddenly hyper-aware of the disapproving stares from the other patrons. Their glances, once vague and peripheral, now felt like piercing judgment. Gregory's chest tightened, a deep sense of shame washing over him. "No, this can't be right," he muttered, his voice barely audible. His eyes darted to Ryan, who had been hovering nearby, observing the scene unfold. "I'm afraid it is, sir," Ryan said softly, his tone firm yet sympathetic. Gregory looked up at him, his face a mask of disbelief and growing horror. They own this place?" he asked, clinging to the hope of some mistake. Ryan nodded solemnly. "Yes, sir. The Carter family has owned the Grand Pearl for many years. They're also responsible for several other successful businesses in the area. Their philanthropy is well known in the community." The reality of his actions struck Gregory like a physical blow. A wave of nausea rose within him as he recalled every cruel remark, every derisive laugh, and every contemptuous glance he had thrown their way. But why didn't they say anything?" Gregory stammered, his voice cracking. "I was so—" He trailed off, his shame choking the words in his throat. Ryan's gaze softened as he replied, "Mr. and Mrs. Carter are known for their grace and humility, sir. They chose to enjoy a quiet evening with their son rather than cause a scene. It's in their nature to rise above such situations." Gregory's face flushed with heat as the full weight of his actions bore down on him. He had been arrogant, prejudiced, and utterly blind. The Carters had shown nothing but dignity and restraint, while he had made a complete fool of himself. "I don't even know what to say," Gregory whispered, his voice heavy with regret. The enormity of his mistake pressed down on him, suffocating and inescapable. Ryan remained silent, giving Gregory space to process the revelation. The once proud businessman sat slumped in his chair, his regret visible in every defeated line of his posture. As the bustling sounds of the restaurant carried on in the background, Gregory felt as though the world had shrunk around him. He replayed every cruel word he had uttered, every jeer and sneer directed at the Carters, his stomach churning with guilt. "What have I done?" he whispered to himself, his voice barely audible. His hands shook as he reached for his water glass, desperate to calm the storm of emotions raging within him. Lifting the glass to his lips, Gregory caught sight of his reflection in the polished silverware. For the first time in years, he truly saw himself. Not the polished, successful man he thought he was, but someone petty, arrogant, and small-minded. A wave of shame crashed over him, leaving him breathless. All the wealth and status he had spent his life accumulating now felt hollow and meaningless in the face of his prejudice. I judged them without knowing a thing about them, Gregory thought, his stomach tightening further. I let my assumptions blind me completely. For the first time in years, Gregory Langston felt genuinely ashamed of himself. The man who had prided himself on his accomplishments now sat in silence, haunted by the weight of his actions and the hollowness of his pride. Gregory Langston sat frozen, his head spinning with guilt and regret. He cast a long glance around the Grand Pearl, truly noticing for the first time the diverse mix of patrons enjoying their meals. Families, couples, and friends from various walks of life shared laughter and conversation. How many times had he dismissed people simply because of their appearance or his own prejudices? The realization made his stomach churn. I didn't even give them a chance, Gregory murmured, his voice barely audible. As his thoughts turned inward, Gregory reflected on the life he had led. His values, his attitude, the way he had wielded his wealth as a weapon, it all seemed so meaningless now. He had always believed that his status made him superior, giving him the right to look down on others. But tonight, confronted by the Carters' grace and dignity, he saw just how misguided and cruel that belief was. "I've been so wrong," Gregory whispered, burying his face in his hands. So terribly wrong. The carefully constructed facade of superiority and entitlement that had defined his life was crumbling. In its place, a heavy sense of guilt and remorse took root, leaving Gregory lost. For so long, his arrogance had been his armor, and now, stripped of it, he wasn't sure who he was. As the weight of his behavior settled over him, Gregory knew he had to make amends. But how? How could he possibly repair the damage from such a public display of prejudice and cruelty? The thought of facing the Carter family filled him with dread, yet he knew he couldn't run from this. Taking a deep breath, Gregory steadied his trembling legs and pushed himself up from his chair. Each step across the restaurant floor felt like a mountain to climb. The murmurs and quiet conversations in the dining room faded as a hushed silence fell over the space. All eyes turned to watch the unfolding scene. Gregory could feel the weight of their stares, but he kept his focus on the family before him. As he reached their table, Nathan, Monica, and young Caleb looked up, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and weariness. Gregory's heart pounded against his ribcage, his mouth dry as he struggled to find the right words. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. Clearing his throat, he forced himself to speak louder, his tone trembling with emotion. I owe you an apology." The restaurant remained utterly silent. Gregory could hear the rapid thud of his heartbeat as he continued. "My behavior tonight was inexcusable," he said, his voice cracking. "I made terrible assumptions about you and your family, and I acted in a way that was cruel and prejudiced." Nathan and Monica exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable, while Caleb looked on with wide eyes. Gregory pressed forward, tears welling up as he continued. "I was so caught up in my own arrogance that I couldn't see the truth. You showed incredible grace and dignity in the face of my rudeness, and I am deeply ashamed of my actions." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "I know that words can't undo the hurt I've caused, but I want you to know how truly sorry I am. What I did was wrong, and I hope that someday I can make amends for my behavior." The Carters remained silent, their expressions calm but unreadable. Gregory stood there, vulnerable and exposed, waiting for their response. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, the tension thick in the air. "I let my prejudice cloud my judgment," Gregory admitted, his voice trembling. Tears now brimmed in his eyes, threatening to spill over. "I made assumptions about you based solely on your appearance, and that was wrong. I failed to see the wonderful people you are, and instead chose to be cruel and hurtful." He looked at each member of the Carter family, his shoulders slumping as he added, "What I did was inexcusable. I can only imagine how my words and actions made you feel, and for that I am truly sorry. Your family showed such grace and dignity in the face of my terrible behavior. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you can find it in your hearts to give me a chance to make things right." The restaurant remained silent, every patron and staff member riveted by the raw vulnerability of the once arrogant man. Gregory's posture, usually so confident, was now hunched with remorse. For the first time in years, he felt truly humbled. He could only wait, hoping against hope that the Carters might one day find it within themselves to forgive him. Nathan and Monica Carter exchanged a look, their expressions calm but unreadable. Little Caleb glanced between his parents and Gregory Langston, his young face a mix of curiosity and confusion. Gregory took a shaky breath, his voice trembling as he fought back tears. "I understand if you can't forgive me right away," he said. "What I did was terrible, and I know it will take time to heal the hurt I've caused. But I want you to know that this experience has opened my eyes. I see now how wrong I was, and I'm committed to changing my ways." The other diners sat in stunned silence, their attention fixed on Gregory. The stark contrast between his earlier arrogance and his current vulnerability was impossible to ignore. The regret etched into his features was genuine, and even those who had watched him with disdain now looked on with a mix of curiosity and cautious sympathy. Gregory stood motionless, his heart pounding as he waited for the Carters' response. The tension in the air was so thick it felt as though the entire restaurant had stopped breathing. Nathan finally broke the silence. His voice, steady and kind, carried across the room. "Mr. Langston, I appreciate your apology. It takes courage to admit when we're wrong, and I can see that you're truly sorry for your actions." Relief flooded Gregory's features, and his shoulders sagged as if a great weight had been lifted. But Nathan wasn't finished. "However," Nathan continued, his voice firm but calm, "I want you to understand the harm that this kind of behavior can cause. When we judge others based on their appearance or make assumptions about their worth, we create division and hurt that ripples far beyond the moment." Gregory nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the floor as Nathan's words sank in. "Every person," Nathan said, his tone softening, "regardless of their background or how they look, deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. We all carry stories, struggles, and triumphs that aren't visible on the surface. That's why it's so important to approach others with an open heart and an open mind." As Nathan spoke, Gregory felt the weight of the words settle over him, like a heavy blanket. For the first time, he fully understood the depth of the pain his actions might have caused. "The lesson here," Nathan continued, his voice growing stronger, "is that we should never judge a book by its cover. Every person we encounter has their own unique worth and value. When we make snap judgments, we not only hurt others but also rob ourselves of the opportunity to learn and grow." Gregory nodded again, his emotions a mix of shame and gratitude. He was deeply humbled by Nathan's calm wisdom and generosity in the face of his cruelty. "I hope," Nathan concluded, his gaze steady, "that this experience will help you see the world and the people in it differently. We all have the power to create a more compassionate and understanding society, one interaction at a time." The restaurant remained silent as Nathan's words lingered in the air. Gregory stood there, absorbing the powerful lesson. His regret for his actions deepened, but alongside it, a flicker of hope began to take root. Perhaps, he thought, there was a chance for him to change, to make amends, and to become better. Gregory opened his mouth to respond, but the words failed him. He felt overwhelmed by the enormity of his emotions. Seeing his struggle, Nathan's expression softened. "Mr. Langston," Nathan said gently, "I believe every mistake is an opportunity for growth." He paused for a moment, then added, "That's why I'd like to extend an invitation to you." Gregory's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "An invitation?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Nathan nodded. "Yes, our family runs a foundation that focuses on helping those in need, promoting equality, and encouraging hard work. We're the primary sponsors, but we're always looking for people who want to make a difference." Gregory stared at Nathan, his disbelief evident. He couldn't fathom why this man, whom he had insulted so cruelly, would offer him such an opportunity. But as he looked into Nathan's eyes, he saw no malice, only sincerity. The restaurant, still hushed, seemed to wait for Gregory's reply. For the first time in his life, Gregory Langston felt a spark of something unfamiliar: humility. Monica, Nathan Carter's wife, spoke up with a gentle smile. "We believe that by working together, we can bring real change to our community." Gregory Langston stood in stunned silence. He couldn't fathom why they would extend such an opportunity to him after the way he had behaved. Nathan continued, his tone calm and steady. "We think that by getting involved with the foundation, you could experience firsthand the value of humility and the importance of respecting others. It's one thing to hear about these lessons, but it's another to live them." A lump formed in Gregory's throat. He was deeply moved by their kindness, but felt completely unworthy of such generosity. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "After how I acted, I don't deserve your kindness." "That's exactly why we're offering it," Monica said softly. "Everyone deserves a chance to learn and grow. We believe this experience could truly transform you." Gregory looked from Nathan to Monica and then to Caleb, who watched the exchange with wide, curious eyes. Overwhelmed by their generosity and the chance they were offering, Gregory struggled to find his voice. "I'm truly honored," Gregory said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'm not sure I'm worthy of this opportunity." Nathan placed a reassuring hand on Gregory's shoulder. "Worthiness isn't about the mistakes you've made in the past," he said. "It's about the choices you make moving forward. We're offering you a chance to be part of something bigger than yourself, to make a real difference in the lives of others." Tears welled in Gregory's eyes as their words touched a part of his heart that had long been dormant. He nodded, his voice trembling. I don't know how to thank you. Your kindness is more than I deserve, but if you'll have me, I'd be honored to help with your foundation." Nathan smiled warmly and extended his hand. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Langston. We're glad to have you." As Gregory shook Nathan's hand, he felt an unexpected weight lift from his shoulders. The shame and regret that had been suffocating him began to give way to something new. Hope, determination flickered within him, igniting a desire to make things right. Monica chimed in again, her voice gentle. "We're having a meeting tomorrow afternoon at the community center. Would you like to join us?" Gregory nodded eagerly. "Yes, absolutely, thank you." In the days that followed, Gregory threw himself into the foundation's work. He attended meetings, helped organize events, and even rolled up his sleeves to serve meals at a local soup kitchen. With each passing day, he felt his perspective shifting. One afternoon, as Gregory helped paint the walls of a rundown community center alongside Nathan, he paused to take in the scene. People from all walks of life worked side by side, laughing, talking, and supporting one another. It was a stark contrast to the exclusive, isolated world Gregory had once valued so highly. "You know, Nathan," Gregory said, wiping sweat from his brow, "I used to think success was all about how much money you had, or how important you seemed." He paused, his voice carrying a new depth. "But now I see things differently." Nathan nodded, encouraging him to continue. "True success isn't about what you have," Gregory said, his voice filled with emotion. "It's about the impact you have on others. It's about making a difference in people's lives." Nathan smiled, patting Gregory on the back. "That's a valuable lesson, Gregory. And you're absolutely right. The most fulfilling success comes from lifting others up, not looking down on them." As Gregory continued to work with the Carter Foundation, he began to see the world through a new lens. He started to recognize the inherent value in every person he met, regardless of their background or status. Compassion began to replace competition in his heart, and for the first time, he discovered a sense of fulfillment he had never known. Gone were the days of plush offices and luxurious restaurants dominating his schedule. Gregory found himself in unfamiliar but rewarding territory: community centers, food banks, and charity events. Each new experience revealed the power of kindness and the beauty of human connection. The transformation within Gregory Langston had begun, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he was truly living with purpose. One sunny morning, Gregory joined Monica Carter at a job training program for single mothers. As he set up chairs for the workshop, he overheard a young woman named Lisa sharing her story. "It's not easy," Lisa said, her voice steady with determination. "But I'm going to make a better life for my kids, no matter what it takes." Gregory paused, struck by her resilience. He had never faced the kind of struggles she described. Her unwavering strength humbled him, leaving him with a newfound respect for those fighting battles he had never imagined. Later that week, Gregory volunteered at a food bank alongside Nathan Carter. As they sorted donations, an elderly man approached them, his eyes brimming with tears. "Thank you," the man said, his voice trembling. "This food, it means I can eat this week." Gregory felt a lump form in his throat. He had never experienced true hunger, and the man's gratitude for something as simple as a bag of groceries moved him deeply. As the days turned into weeks, Gregory found himself constantly inspired by the people he met through the Carter Foundation. He saw single parents working tirelessly to support their families, immigrants learning English to build better lives, and teenagers mentoring younger kids to break the cycle of poverty. One evening, as Gregory served meals at a homeless shelter, he struck up a conversation with a man named Tom. Tom shared his story with quiet honesty. "I lost my job and my home because of a medical crisis," he said. "It's been tough, but I'm grateful for places like this. They remind me there are good people in the world willing to help." Gregory nodded, his emotions swirling. He realized how quick he had once been to judge people like Tom, assuming their circumstances were the result of laziness or bad choices. Now he saw the complex realities that could lead to homelessness and the courage it took to rebuild. On the drive home, Gregory reflected on his life. The designer suits and luxury cars that had once defined his identity now felt hollow compared to the richness of the human spirit he had witnessed. As Gregory became more involved in the foundation, he found himself spending more time with the Carter family. Their kindness and wisdom slowly chipped away at the walls he had built around himself. One Saturday afternoon, he joined them for a community cleanup event at a local park. As they picked up litter, Caleb Carter approached Gregory, his young eyes wide with curiosity. "Mr. Langston," Caleb asked, his voice full of innocence, "why do you help us now?" Gregory stopped, caught off guard by the question. He knelt down to Caleb's level, feeling the weight of the child's gaze. "Well, Caleb," Gregory began softly, "I learned that I was wrong about a lot of things. Your family showed me that true happiness comes from helping others, not just having money." Monica, overhearing the exchange, smiled warmly. "That's a beautiful way to put it, Gregory," she said. "We're glad you're here with us." As the weeks passed, Gregory began to look forward to the time he spent with the Carters. They invited him to family dinners where laughter and meaningful conversations filled the air. It was a stark contrast to the lonely, isolated meals Gregory used to have in upscale restaurants. During one such dinner, Nathan shared stories about the foundation's early days and the challenges they faced. Gregory listened intently, captivated by the family's perseverance. "You know, Gregory," Nathan said, his eyes twinkling with humor, "when we first started, a lot of people doubted us. They said we couldn't make a difference, but we believed even small acts of kindness could change lives." Gregory nodded, a surge of admiration washing over him. The Carters had built something extraordinary, not just through resources, but through sheer determination and belief in the power of compassion. In their presence, Gregory felt something he hadn't in years, a sense of belonging. The Carters had not only opened his eyes to a new way of living, but had also opened their hearts, showing him the strength of forgiveness and the beauty of human connection. As Gregory continued to work alongside the Carter family, he felt a profound transformation taking root within himself. The arrogance that had once defined him was slowly being replaced by humility and compassion. Joy blossomed in the simple acts of kindness he performed, and for the first time, he felt a sense of fulfillment that his wealth had never provided. One day, after a successful fundraising event for the Carter Foundation, Monica turned to Gregory with a warm smile. "You've come a long way, Gregory," she said. "We're proud of the person you're becoming." Her words struck a chord in Gregory. He could feel the changes within himself, but hearing them acknowledged by Monica filled him with gratitude and determination to continue growing. As Gregory's journey of personal growth continued, the changes in his demeanor became increasingly evident to those around him. The aloofness and entitlement that had once been his trademarks were replaced by genuine warmth and compassion, traits that touched everyone he encountered. At a charity gala for the Carter Foundation, Gregory's transformation was on full display. He moved through the crowd with ease, greeting both wealthy donors and volunteers with equal respect and kindness. "Is that really Gregory Langston?" whispered Margaret, one of his longtime acquaintances from the country club. "I can hardly believe my eyes." Indeed, Gregory's change was hard to miss. He listened intently to a young scholarship recipient's story, his eyes filled with genuine interest. When the young man finished speaking, Gregory placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. "Your determination is inspiring," Gregory said sincerely. "Keep pushing forward and you'll achieve great things." As the evening went on, more and more people took notice of Gregory's newfound humility and grace. His infectious enthusiasm for the Foundation's work began to spark curiosity and admiration among his peers. "Gregory," called Andrew, a fellow businessman, as he approached. "I must say, you seem different lately. What's gotten into you?" Gregory smiled warmly. "I've learned that true fulfillment comes from helping others, Andrew," he replied. "The Carters have shown me that wealth isn't just about money. It's about the richness of human connections and the impact we can have on people's lives." Andrew nodded thoughtfully, clearly moved by Gregory's words. "You know, I've been thinking about getting more involved in charity work myself. Perhaps you could tell me more about the Foundation." As Gregory eagerly shared details about the Carter Foundation's initiatives, a small crowd gathered around them. His passion for the cause was evident, and soon, others were expressing interest in volunteering or donating. By the end of the evening, Gregory had inspired several of his old acquaintances to support the Foundation's mission. His transformation not only changed him but began to ripple outward, touching the lives of others in his social circle. With each passing day, Gregory's involvement with the Carter Foundation deepened. He threw himself wholeheartedly into their projects, using his business acumen and resources to support initiatives that promoted equality and provided opportunities for the underprivileged. One sunny morning, Gregory found himself at a local community center, rolling up his sleeves to help renovate the building. He worked side by side with volunteers from all walks of life, painting walls and repairing furniture. As he wiped sweat from his brow, Gregory noticed Nathan Carter watching him with a warm smile. "You've come a long way, Gregory," Nathan said. Gregory nodded, a feeling of pride and fulfillment washing over him. "This work, it's changing me, Nathan. I never knew how much joy could come from helping others." Word of Gregory's dedication spread throughout the community. His transformation from a self-centered millionaire to a passionate philanthropist became a topic of conversation at social gatherings and business meetings alike. People who had once viewed Gregory with disdain now spoke of him with respect and admiration. His newfound purpose and humility inspired others to look beyond themselves and consider how they could make a difference in their own lives. The man who had once believed that success was measured by wealth and status now found himself enriched by the connections he was building and the lives he was touching. Gregory Langston had not only changed his own life, he was helping to transform his community, one act of kindness at a time. Part 12. A New Legacy. Gregory Langston's transformation began to ripple outward, and his influence started to attract more donors and volunteers to the Carter Foundation. Leveraging his business connections, Gregory secured funding for new initiatives, including a scholarship program for underprivileged students and a job training center for the homeless. At a foundation board meeting, Gregory shared an ambitious vision. "We have the resources and the passion to make a real difference," he said, his eyes shining with excitement. "Let's think bigger. We could open similar centers in neighboring cities, maybe even start a nationwide movement." The board members, including Nathan and Monica Carter, listened intently. Gregory's enthusiasm was infectious, and soon the room buzzed with excitement about the possibilities. As the foundation's work grew in scope and impact, Gregory found himself busier than ever. But unlike his previous pursuits of wealth and status, this work filled him with a profound sense of purpose and joy. His days were spent meeting with community leaders, coordinating volunteers, and personally overseeing projects. One afternoon, while leaving a newly opened youth center funded by the foundation, a young girl approached Gregory shyly. "Mr. Langston," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "thank you for helping us. This place means so much to me and my friends." Gregory knelt to her level, his heart full of emotion. "You're very welcome," he said softly. "But remember, it's not just me, it's all of us, working together, that makes this possible." The girl smiled, her eyes twinkling with gratitude, and Gregory felt a warmth in his heart that no luxury he'd ever owned could rival. As Gregory continued his work with the Carter Foundation, he often reflected on the life he had once led. One evening, he sat alone in his office, surrounded by project plans and thank-you letters from those the foundation had helped. His eyes fell on a framed photo on his desk. It had been taken at the grand opening of the foundation's newest community center. In the picture, Gregory stood alongside the Carter family and a group of smiling volunteers. His own expression in the photo was genuine, a stark contrast to the forced, arrogant smirk he used to wear in his corporate headshots. "What a fool I was," Gregory muttered, tracing the edge of the frame with his fingers. He thought of how shallow and misguided his previous beliefs about wealth and status had been. The designer suits, exclusive memberships, and lavish parties had brought him no real success. As he organized the papers on his desk, Gregory's mind wandered to the many people he had met through the foundation. He thought of Maria, a single mother who had secured stable employment through their job training program. He remembered Marcus, a bright young student now attending college on a foundation scholarship. Maria's joy when she received her first paycheck and the tears in Marcus's eyes when he opened his college acceptance letter touched Gregory deeply. These stories of perseverance and hard work gave him a newfound appreciation for humility and gratitude. Moments like these were worth more to him than any material luxury he had ever owned. Gregory leaned back in his chair, a sense of peace washing over him. For the first time in his life, he felt truly fulfilled. The constant need to prove himself as the richest or most powerful in the room had vanished. In its place was a quiet contentment, born from the knowledge that he was making a real difference in the world. As he prepared to leave his office for the day, Gregory paused at the door. He turned back to look at the room. Evidence of his new life's work was scattered across the desk and pinned to the walls. Letters of gratitude, photos of community events, and plans for upcoming initiatives. A smile played on his lips as he realized just how far he had come. As the weeks turned into months, Gregory found himself spending more and more time with the Carter family. Their kindness, wisdom, and unwavering commitment to helping others continued to inspire him. The bond he shared with them became one of the most meaningful relationships in his life, one built on respect, shared values, and the power of redemption. Gregory Langston was no longer the man who had walked into the Grand Pearl that fateful evening. He had become someone new, someone who measured success not by what he owned, but by the lives he touched. The guidance of the Carter family had become an invaluable part of Gregory Langston's journey toward becoming a better person. One evening, after a particularly successful fundraising event for the Carter Foundation, Gregory found himself in Nathan and Monica Carter's cozy living room. "You've come a long way, Gregory," Nathan said, his eyes warm with pride. "We're proud of the progress you've made." Gregory felt a lump rise in his throat. "I couldn't have done it without your family's support," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Monica leaned forward, her gentle smile encouraging. "We all face challenges in life, Gregory," she said. "It's how we overcome them that defines us." As the conversation flowed, Nathan and Monica began to share stories of their own struggles and triumphs. They spoke of the early days of their business ventures, recounting setbacks and moments of doubt that had nearly derailed their dreams. "There was a time," Nathan revealed, "when we almost lost everything. Our first restaurant was on the brink of failure." Gregory listened intently, his eyes wide with surprise. He had always assumed that the Carters' success had come easily. "We were working around the clock," Monica added, "barely making ends meet, but we refused to give up." Their stories of perseverance struck a chord with Gregory. He began to see the Carters not just as successful business owners, but as individuals who had faced adversity head-on and emerged stronger. As the evening wore on, the conversation turned to the Foundation's work. Gregory found himself deeply moved by the Carters' unwavering passion for helping others and their commitment to making a difference in people's lives. "You know, Gregory," Nathan said thoughtfully, "true success isn't measured by the size of your bank account. It's about the lives you touch and the positive change you bring to the world." These words resonated deeply with Gregory. He realized that his growing bond with the Carters was changing him in profound ways. Their influence was helping him develop a more compassionate and expansive worldview, one that extended far beyond the narrow confines of his former life. Gregory's transformation was tested one Sunday afternoon at the local country club. He was having lunch on the terrace when he spotted Andrew Blackwell, an old business associate, approaching his table. "Gregory, my good man," Andrew boomed, clapping him on the shoulder. "It's been ages. How are you?" Gregory forced a polite smile. "I'm well, Andrew. How are you?" Andrew pulled up a chair, uninvited, leaning back as if he owned the space. "Oh, you know, same old, same old. I heard you've been spending time with that Carter bunch and their little charity project. What's that about?" Gregory felt his jaw tighten. "It's not a little charity project, Andrew," he replied evenly. "It's a foundation doing important work for our community." Andrew scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Come on, Gregory, you can't be serious. Those people don't need handouts, they just need to work harder." Gregory's face flushed with anger, but he took a deep breath, grounding himself in the lessons he had learned from the Carters. "That's not true, Andrew," Gregory said, his voice firm. "The Foundation helps people who are already working incredibly hard but face systemic barriers." "Systemic barriers?" Andrew repeated with a mocking laugh. "That's just liberal nonsense. You're not buying into that, are you?" Gregory stood, his voice steady. "I'm not buying into anything, Andrew. I've seen the reality with my own eyes. The Foundation's work is vital, and the people it serves deserve our support and respect." Andrew's face darkened, his tone growing accusatory. "You've changed, Gregory. What happened to you?" Gregory looked him in the eye, his voice calm but resolute. "I grew up, Andrew," he said. "I've learned to see beyond my own narrow worldview. The Foundation and the Carters have taught me the value of compassion and understanding." As Andrew sputtered in disbelief, Gregory remained composed. He had finally stepped out of the shadow of his past and into the light of a better future. Gregory Langston felt a surge of pride as he reflected on how far he had come from the man he used to be. The news of his involvement with the Carter Family Foundation began to spread throughout the town, and people started seeing him in a completely new light. The once aloof millionaire, known for his exclusivity and arrogance, was now a familiar face at community events. Gregory rolled up his sleeves and worked alongside volunteers, his genuine smile and willingness to listen to others' stories touching countless hearts. At the local grocery store, Mrs. Claudia, a longtime resident, whispered to her friend, "Can you believe that's the same Gregory Langston? I saw him helping at the soup kitchen last week. He was so kind to everyone." Her friend nodded, equally surprised. "I heard he's been using his business connections to create job opportunities for those in need. It's like he's a completely different person." The change in Gregory's reputation was gradual but undeniable. People who once avoided eye contact with him on the street now greeted him warmly. Local shop owners smiled when he entered, no longer seeing him as just a wealthy customer but as a valued member of the community. At a town council meeting, Mayor Claudia publicly acknowledged Gregory's contributions. "Mr. Langston's dedication to our community through his work with the Carter Family Foundation is truly inspiring," the mayor said. "He's shown us all the power of second chances and the importance of giving back." Gregory's story became a topic of conversation at dinner tables across the town. Parents used it to teach their children about the importance of kindness and the potential for change. In schools, teachers shared Gregory's journey as an example of personal growth and the impact of compassion. Even those who had once been skeptical of Gregory's transformation began to come around. Old business associates, who had initially dismissed his new path as a phase, now approached him with curiosity. They wanted to learn more about the Foundation's work and how they, too, could get involved. One sunny afternoon, as Gregory walked down Main Street, a young woman named Sarah stopped him. With tears in her eyes, she said, "Mr. Langston, I just wanted to thank you. Your support changed my life. You're proof that it's never too late to become a better person." Her words struck Gregory deeply. His story of redemption resonated throughout the community, inspiring others to reflect on their own actions and attitudes. People began to question their prejudices and search for ways to make a positive impact in their own lives. One evening, Gregory sat with the Carter family around a large table in the foundation's office. Colorful posters and stacks of flyers filled the room as they discussed their plans for an upcoming fundraising event, their most ambitious one yet. "We need to make this special," Nathan said, his eyes twinkling with excitement. "Something that will really showcase what our foundation stands for." Gregory nodded eagerly. "What if we held it at the community center? It's right in the heart of town and would show our commitment to the people we're helping." Monica smiled warmly at Gregory. "That's a wonderful idea, Gregory. It's perfect for bringing everyone together." In the weeks leading up to the event, Gregory poured his energy into the preparations. He spent long hours making phone calls, reaching out to local businesses for support, and coordinating with volunteers. His dedication was evident to everyone involved. When the day of the event finally arrived, the community center buzzed with activity. Colorful banners adorned the walls, and tables lined the room, each showcasing a different program the foundation supported. Gregory stood at the entrance, greeting guests with a warm smile and a firm handshake. Many attendees were surprised to see the former aloof millionaire so deeply engaged and passionate about the cause. "Gregory, I hardly recognized you," exclaimed Mrs. Claudia, a longtime resident. Gregory laughed warmly. "Well, Mrs. Claudia, people can surprise you." The event was a resounding success, bringing the community together and raising vital funds for the foundation's programs. As Gregory looked around at the bustling room filled with hope and unity, he realized just how much his life had changed, and how much joy that change had brought him. As the evening progressed, Gregory stepped onto the stage to address the crowd. His voice trembled slightly with emotion as he began to speak about the Carter Foundation's work and its profound impact on his life. "Before I met the Carters," Gregory admitted, "I thought success was measured by the size of your bank account. But now I know that true success comes from the lives you touch and the good you do for others." The audience listened intently, many nodding in agreement, as Gregory shared his journey. When he finished, the room erupted into applause. People approached him afterward, praising his sincerity and dedication. As the night drew to a close, it was clear that the event had been a resounding success. The foundation had raised more money than they had ever hoped for, ensuring they could expand their programs and help even more people in need. Nathan Carter clapped Gregory on the back, his eyes shining with pride. "You did it, Gregory," Nathan said. "Your hard work made this possible." Gregory felt warmth spread through his chest. For the first time in his life, he felt truly fulfilled, knowing his efforts were making a real difference in people's lives. As the last guests filtered out of the community center, Gregory stood by the exit, shaking hands and exchanging warm goodbyes. The evening had been a whirlwind of activity, laughter, and heartfelt moments. Now, as the room grew quiet, Gregory found himself alone with his thoughts. He walked slowly through the hall, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. Colorful banners still hung from the walls, showcasing the foundation's work. Smiling faces of children in new schools, elderly individuals receiving care, and families moving into their first homes. As Gregory gazed at the images, his mind drifted back to that fateful night at the Grand Pearl. He could still hear the echo of his own mocking laughter and see the hurt in the Carter family's eyes. The memory made him wince, but it also filled him with profound gratitude for how far he had come since that moment. "What a journey!" Gregory whispered to himself, shaking his head in wonder. He made his way to a nearby chair and sat down, letting out a deep sigh. The weight of the evening's success settled over him like a warm blanket. Gregory closed his eyes, feeling a sense of peace he had never known during his previous life of wealth and arrogance. In that quiet moment, Gregory realized he had found something far more valuable than any material possession. a true sense of purpose. The joy he felt from helping others and seeing lives transformed was beyond anything he had experienced before. A gentle hand on his shoulder startled Gregory from his reverie. He looked up to see Nathan Carter standing above him, smiling warmly. "Quite a night, wasn't it?" Nathan said, his voice filled with pride and affection. Gregory nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I never imagined I could feel this fulfilled," he admitted. "Thank you, Nathan. You and your family gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve one." Nathan squeezed Gregory's shoulder. "You've more than earned it, my friend. The man you've become is someone to be admired." They stood together, looking out over the remnants of the successful event. Gregory felt a deep sense of belonging. He was no longer the outsider, the arrogant millionaire looking down on others. He was part of something bigger, something meaningful. Gregory turned to face Nathan, his voice thick with gratitude. "Nathan, I can't thank you enough for giving me this chance," he said. "You and your family showed me kindness when I least deserved it. You've changed my life in ways I can't even put into words." Nathan smiled, his eyes twinkling. "You've changed your own life, Gregory. We just opened the door. You walked through it." As Gregory stood there, surrounded by the quiet echoes of the evening's success, he realized that he had truly found his place. The transformation he had undergone was complete, and his heart was filled with hope for the journey ahead. Gregory shook his head, overwhelmed by Nathan's humility. "But you saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. You believed in me when I was at my lowest." "That's what this foundation is all about," Nathan replied. "It's about seeing the potential in people and giving them the opportunity to grow. And you, my friend," he said with a proud smile, "have grown in ways that make us all so proud." Gregory's eyes widened, a lump forming in his throat. "Really? You're proud of me?" Nathan nodded, his expression serious. "More than you know. The impact you've had on this community is immeasurable. You've inspired others to give back, to look beyond themselves. That's a powerful thing, Gregory." Gregory felt an unexpected wave of emotion. He had never anticipated hearing such words, especially from a man he had once treated with disdain. "I never knew life could be this fulfilling," Gregory admitted. "The lessons I've learned from you and your family, they've changed everything for me." Nathan's eyes crinkled with understanding. "That's the beauty of compassion and forgiveness," he said. "They have the power to transform lives, not just the lives of those we help, but our own as well." The two men stood in comfortable silence, reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. Gregory felt a deep sense of respect and admiration for Nathan, a feeling that was clearly mutual. "You know," Nathan said softly, "when we first met, I never imagined we'd be standing here as friends. But I'm grateful for it." "So am I," Gregory replied, his voice choked with emotion. Unable to find the right words, he reached out and clasped Nathan's hand. The firm handshake conveyed a world of understanding, respect, and friendship. A bond forged through adversity and strengthened by shared purpose. Gregory threw himself into his work with the Carter Foundation, pouring his heart and soul into every project. As the months passed, he often reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him to this point. The man he once was seemed like a distant memory, replaced by someone who valued equality, humility, and compassion above all else. The Carter family watched with pride as Gregory's dedication never wavered. They marveled at how far he had come from that fateful night at the Grand Pearl. "His transformation is truly remarkable," Monica Carter commented to Nathan one evening. "He's become such an integral part of our work." Nathan nodded in agreement. "It's inspiring to see how he's embraced our mission. He's not just talking the talk, he's walking the walk every single day." As Gregory's passion for the foundation grew, so did his influence. Friends, acquaintances, and even his old social circle began to take notice of the profound changes in him. Many were intrigued by the fulfillment they saw in Gregory's eyes and the sense of purpose that seemed to drive him. One afternoon, as Gregory was leaving a foundation meeting, he noticed a young man sitting on a bench outside, his head in his hands. The sight reminded Gregory of the many people he had encountered through the foundation's work. "Are you all right?" Gregory asked, approaching the young man. The young man, who introduced himself as Marcus, explained that he was struggling financially and felt lost about his future. Instead of simply offering a donation, Gregory felt compelled to do more. "Why don't we grab a coffee?" he suggested. "I'd like to hear more about your situation." Over the next hour, Gregory listened intently to Marcus's story. In the young man, Gregory saw a reflection of the people he had come to admire through the Foundation's programs, and even a glimpse of his former self. Marcus's challenges mirrored those of many the Foundation had helped, and Gregory realized that this moment wasn't just about offering assistance, it was about giving Marcus hope and guidance. This encounter marked the beginning of a new chapter in Gregory's journey, one where he used his own experience of redemption to inspire and uplift others. Gregory Langston had become more than a benefactor or a volunteer. He had become a symbol of the transformative power of kindness, proving that it's never too late to change your life or to change the lives of those around you. As Gregory Langston leaned forward, he spoke to Marcus with earnestness. "I want to help you, but not just with money," Gregory said, his tone warm yet resolute. "I'd like to mentor you, if you're open to it. There's so much potential in you, and I believe that with some guidance and hard work, you can overcome these challenges." Marcus's eyes widened in surprise and gratitude. "Really? You'd do that for me?" Gregory smiled, a spark of genuine care lighting his expression. "Of course. I've learned that true fulfillment comes from helping others. Let's meet regularly, and I'll share what I've learned about perseverance, hard work, and seizing opportunities." Over the next few months, Gregory guided Marcus through job applications, financial planning, and personal development. As Marcus's life began to improve, Gregory experienced an overwhelming sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had made a real difference in someone else's journey. At the next major Carter Foundation event, Gregory stood on stage looking out at the sea of faces before him. The room was filled with people whose lives had been touched by the Foundation's efforts. His heart swelled with emotion as he began to speak. "A year ago, I was a different man," Gregory admitted, his voice rich with sincerity. "I was blinded by my own prejudices and misconceptions. But thanks to the kindness and wisdom of the Carter family, I've learned the true value of compassion and equality." As Gregory continued, he spotted familiar faces in the crowd. People he had worked alongside, volunteers he had inspired, and even Marcus, sitting proudly among the audience. Each person represented a life changed, a story of resilience and hope. "Today," Gregory said with conviction, "I stand before you not as a wealthy businessman, but as a humble servant to this community. I reject discrimination and prejudice in all forms, and I commit myself fully to the work of this foundation." The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing through the hall. As Gregory stepped down from the stage, he was met with a wave of well-wishers, eager to share their stories and express their gratitude. In that moment, Gregory felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The transformation he had undergone was no longer just personal. It had rippled outward, touching countless lives. Through the Carter Foundation, Gregory Langston had not only found redemption, but also a purpose far greater than himself. His journey proved that change is always possible, and that even the most unlikely people can become a force for good.